semester. A quick word about that research right. It will not be an extensive research paper. So while we're building on these skills of understanding APA documentation and knowing how to conduct reliable, solid research and pulling source material into papers, as far as this particular course goes, we're not necessarily going into depth as far as research writing. For those taking this course who needs certificates or diplomas. If you're working on an associate's degree, that's a different thing, and there's a larger component concerning research writing in that particular course. That's English 1101. So just to explain the distinctions, but if you look on our syllabus, you'll see that one of the course competencies established at the state level that this course has to cover in order to be accredited is to discuss research writing and documentation. So that's what we're going to do now. Next week you will have your Unit 2 test that will cover all of the work that we've done between Unit 6 and 9, finishing this week. It will open next Friday and it will continue through the following Monday, just as we did with the other tests. It's the same type of format, just different material. Okay, you still have the same amount of time and so forth. Also be aware that our grace period starts next week. I sent out an email about that with detailed information. Please read that information before you contact me. If you've missed assignments that you want to make up, now this does not include the essay in its draft, the comparison contrast essay and draft. You can't make that up. It doesn't include the Unit 1 test. You can't make that up. But any smaller assignments that you missed for some reason, you can make up to 3 of those. And so I give you specific instructions about how to go about setting that up, because I don't automatically go back and open everything. I only open things for students who request it. So please note you have to make the request. Again, all of that information is in the announcements as well as the email that I sent just earlier today about that particular grace period. The last day to withdraw yourself from any course is March 25th, and notice that students do have to withdraw themselves. And it used to be that instructors could do that for them, but we no longer have that capability. Your advisors can't do it, so you have to make that decision yourself. And normally that happens if you've fallen behind in a course, or if your grade point average is so low that there's not much of a chance of you catching up. So please be aware of that you do have that option. Always check with financial aid if you're using financial aid and not paying out of pocket before you withdraw from any course, just to see the impact there. What happens essentially is that you receive a W on your transcript, which does not impact your grade point average. It just shows that you started a course but you didn't complete it, that you withdrew before the end date. And again, that's better than an F, which actually, will impact your grade point average. If you look at my transcript from the university, I had quite a few W's, honestly. So sometimes I'm often trying to take more than I could finish in a semester. So just to let you know how that works. So let's begin and talk about your assignments this week. Beginning with plagiarism, and I had this note. It was part of the information. Plagiarism comes from the Latin word plagiarius, which means kidnapper. And it refers to the wrongful act of taking the product of another person's mind and presenting it as someone else as your own. Now notice that it's your mind, all right? Most students know that to copy and paste somebody else's ideas without providing correct documentation and without putting quotation marks around those words is plagiarism. But that's where most students then misunderstand, not most, but many. They think that if they rewrite something in their own words, that they don't have to document it, they don't have to give credit, but that's still plagiarism because it's somebody's ideas, all right? So we're talking ideas, we're talking the words themselves, and we're talking even original sentence structures, all right? Even original sentence structures without giving credit. And that's what the word documentation means. It's how you give credit to the original source where you found some information, okay? 85% of the time, in my experience as an English instructor over 30-something years, students unintentionally plagiarize. They don't mean to. It's just they're not quite sure what they're supposed to do, which is why we're covering this information in this particular course. Again, that's 85% of the time. Only very rarely do students intentionally turn in somebody else's work as their own, and they know they're doing it and they mean to do it, and that's the reason I create a distinction, and I've got a note about this underneath your grades if you look on the syllabus, and you honestly can tell the difference. Anything that's intentionally plagiarized will receive a 0. Unintentional plagiarism, you can't make above a 50. And that's part of the reason that I emphasize, please do not do any research for any assignment unless the assignment calls for it, because to handle information incorrectly is a form of plagiarism. All right. Now, when we're talking about documentation, which means giving credit, right? In our case, we're using we mean two different things, two specific things. To document something means how you document it in the paper itself, and we call that in-text citations. Another word for that is also parenthetical documentation. You may have seen that before. What's in parentheses? I have to stop talking so I can type. Those mean the same things. How in the paper or whatever you're writing itself, you give credit to a source. The other part of the documentation is a bibliography at the end of your paper that contains all of the information necessary so that a reader could actually go to that same source and look it up. What you use in the paper is based on whatever comes first in the in your parenthetical document, in your bibliography. And I'll tell you more about that in a second. Now notice that there are two forms of plagiarism. One is copying word for word, and the guideline is anytime you copy 5 or more words in the same order as that found on your source, the original source, you have to put quotation marks around it. Now that doesn't include really common sayings that, and then she went to the store, something like that. But normally when something's worded in such a way that it's unique to that particular writer, that's when you have to put quotation marks around it, okay? And then not documenting it. Okay. Now notice that if you're not quoting directly, if you're writing something in your own words, you don't need quotation marks because that indicates whatever comes between this is somebody else talking. But you do need to document source material. So again, documentation, just as a form of review, means how you give credit to a source in a paper. All right, or sometimes, for example, I've had students who take speech courses, and after their speech, they have to, if it's the speech required research, they have to submit to, excuse me just a second, I'm trying to help a student who's attempting to, he's attempting to join us. Okay, that should hopefully get her there. All right, let's see, chat. If you're, let's see, Alexander, if you're quoting something that is common knowledge, do you cite? Okay, very good question. And common knowledge is a tricky term because common knowledge, and you may know this already, but common knowledge does not mean that you, that everybody knows it. All right. For example, John Adams, who was what, the second president of the United States, his birthday would be considered common knowledge. I don't know what it is. Do you know what it is? So fact-based information that's not going to change, that you could go to 3 or 4 different encyclopedias and see exactly the same thing would be considered common knowledge. So normally it has to do with dates. There's no opinion whatsoever. It's fact based. A lot of times when you're dealing with historical information, a lot of that often can be considered common knowledge. My suggestion or recommendation to students is, when in doubt, always document. That keeps you safe, even if it's, would seem unnecessary, but that's guaranteeing that you're avoiding plagiarism is my suggestion. Does that help answer your question, Alexander? Great. Okay. And if you ever have a question about something specific and you want to email me and ask, I'll be happy to get back to you about it. Okay. When you're referring to documentation, we're talking about, of course, two things. The bibliographic entry at the end of the paper itself and in-text citation. For this course, we're going to be using the American Psychological Association format for documenting. In high school, almost all English high school teachers, and I've been one, I know this, teach the Modern Language Association method of documentation. Oops, can't spell. Okay. And that's mainly because they're English teachers, and most of the types of papers they're going to have you do have to do with their course material. The type of documentation formats, just so that you're aware of it, that you use often depends on the particular discipline. So, for example, again, English courses, especially literature courses, use MLA formatting. I'm not sure about history. History used to use MLA. They may have changed to APA, which is what we're going to cover in this course. Let's see, I know the fine arts use MLA, the humanities use MLA styles, but in this course, again, we're going to use the American Psychological Association format, and that is because this college is a social sciences college, right? That's the focus. And so if you take a psychology course, obviously, and have to write a research paper, this is the type that you're looking for. I mean, these are the formats you'll use. Sociology, the same way. If you're taking education courses, I'm pretty sure they use APA style. Business courses use APA style. Medical field uses APA style. As a matter of fact, this is one of the primary reasons I teach APA. Those in the nursing program, the instructors in the nursing program have asked us to cover that because they're nurses. I'm not sure about LPN, how much research you do. I know you do some, I think, but certainly when you get into sort of the associates level, they use the American Psychological Association formats. So that's to explain to you why I use this particular I teach this particular format. It's because this is the format if you have to do any research at all. And I realize a lot of you are in disciplines that may never have to do research. Again, though, this is still one of the competencies required for this particular course, so we have to cover it. But others of you will, and so that's the reason, I choose particularly the APA style. So again, when you're talking about documenting, you're talking about two things. And by the way, besides just MLA, the four main types of documentation formats, there's the Chicago Style Manual, and then let's see, the Turabian Style Manual. So again, it just depends on your discipline, what course you're using, but any instructor is going to tell you if they're requiring research of you, are going to tell you what particular style they want you to use. So let's go to, I want to show you a couple of things about APA. This particular handout I'm about to show you, I will supply, when I send the email that actually contains the link for this session, I will include this as an attachment. And the reason that I can't actually upload it to our course is because of the color coding. It's not considered accessible for all students, and our courses have to be accessible because of the color. Some people are colorblind, but I've given you other resources, so you're not dependent on this guide, in other words, right? But I am going to email you a copy if you find it helpful. Now, if we were in a face-to-face class, I would distribute this guide, and I would tell you on this first page, down across the side here, to type the word or write the word print. Because these 3 entries are the most common types of entries if you're actually holding the book, the newspaper, or the magazine in your hand. Okay, so these are the most common types of APA formatted bibliographic entries for print sources. Okay, so notice, and they're color coded, so anything that's this color is the author. Authors' names are inverted, so the last name stands out, comma, and then here's one of the, I'm going to point out some odd features in APA formatting that differ from MLA, if you happen to remember, if it's been fairly recent since you've been in high school and you remember how MLA formatting looked. One of the first differences is that you don't spell out the author's first or middle names. You just use the initials. The second difference is that the date of publication, month, day, and year, in this case just the year, comes second, placed in parentheses, okay, and then followed by a period. In MLA formatting, it comes close to the end. Because APA formatting, the types of disciplines that use APA formats most commonly are research heavy, and so the date of research is important. Like, when was this published? We need to, how recent was this information? All right, the third kind of odd thing in APA formatting is the way they handle the titles of web pages or the titles of articles. You do not put quotation marks around it, all right, which is what you would do with an MLA format, and you also don't capitalize all the main words. You only capitalize the first word after a colon, and any proper nouns or acronyms. Okay, so notice with this color coding, we're following along here. Black is the date. I think that's actually supposed to be kind of a grayish, dark gray. And then red is the title of an article. And then the title of the periodical comes next. And the rest of this is handled exactly the way you handle APA formatting. So a periodical, by the way, is any publication that comes out routinely. So, for example, newspapers are published every day, so it's a daily periodical. Some magazines are published every week, like, for example, Newsweek. So that would be considered a weekly periodical. Some publications are published once a month. Some are published, twice a year or even yearly. All right. So that's what periodical means. Then after that is the darker red, the volume number, and then the issue number, then the page numbers. Again, these 3 entries are the most common APA formats you use for a print source. Okay. However, because of the internet, with the advent of the internet, very few students use print sources anymore. Most commonly, and this is the second page of this handout, again, I will have the link. I'll send out the link for this later so that if you want a copy of it, you'll have it available. And by the way, I actually recommend that you print a copy of this, because I know with this upcoming test, and definitely with the last test, you will have some entries that I'm going to give you the information and ask you to put it in the right order. And so it's fine with me if you use anything that I give you, PowerPoints, handouts, it's fine with me if you use them on the test. The textbook itself, you don't really have time to look up everything, but some little time saving. Nobody memorizes this, all right? I have to teach it, so I pretty much know most of the main types of formats that are used in APA, simply because I teach it, and go over it and over it. But nobody memorizes most of this information, so it's fine with me if you use it to help you. Now, if we were in a face-to-face class, what I would do is, again, give you this handout, and then on the second page, I would tell you to write electronic, which means, or online. These are the most common formats. They're not all of them by any stretch. There's a format you use if you use a YouTube video. There's a format if you use a blog. There's a format you use if it's an email, you know, and you for some reason you're copying somebody's email into a research paper. But these are the most common: an article that you find on the internet, an article from a database, and at the end of the semester, all right, the last 5 weeks, this is where we're going to start talking about database material more specifically and how to pull that into a paper. An article from a university, an article from a periodical, and again, you know what a periodical is now, an article with just a corporate author or a government agency. These are the what, 6, I think? No, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, these are the 6 most common types of resources that students will use in a research paper. So that's why we just limited it to this. So article, again, you have the author's last name, comma, first initial, period. Then you have the year of publication, or if it gives you the whole date, like for example, if this was published in July 22nd, 2000, you'd put July 22nd, 2000, period. Then here's the title of the web page, all right? Then here's the difference between print source and electronic sources. You put what's called in APA formatting retrieval information. You actually use the word retrieved, and then you put the date on which you've actually looked at the website, okay? And then the web address. Now, the reason this date is important is because, as you know, websites change. They're edited, they're updated, information's taken down, information's replaced. And so what you're saying is on the date that I visited this site, this is the information that was there, all right? Notice again that the titles of the web page, it's just capitalize the first word. You don't capitalize the rest of them. You don't put quotation marks around it. Now, if you're working with it from a database, like one of the GNTC databases, you don't have to put the whole long web address. You can just put from Galileo database. If there is what's called a database number, all right, in that case, you don't have to put retrieval information. You just put D period O, D period O period. I mean, it actually gives you, and I'll show you that. We'll have a live session the middle, it'll be in April, where I set up the little research right you're going to do for me, and we'll go over all this database information again. But if you have a document that has a database number and it begins with DOI, then you don't have to put retrieval information, because what this shows, there'll be a whole string of numbers and letters after it. That thing is frozen in time, okay? It's been assigned a number, it's been filed in a database, it's just like a filing cabinet, and it's not going to change. And that's a little thing, you don't need to worry about that anytime soon, but just, I find the more times I say something, the more, especially introducing new information, the easier it is for students to remember, okay? All right, so again, here's this, just to sort of have you be familiar. Now, in the paper itself, remember we talked about documentation being 2 things. One, a bibliography that comes at the end of the paper and has a list of all of the sources that you used in the paper itself. All right, and so that's what these are. These are bibliographic sources. The second thing, though, is in the paper itself, it's not enough just to have a bibliography. You have to identify where the paraphrase or the summary or the direct quotation comes from in the paper. And so in the in-text citation in the paper, and I'll show you a sample, is whatever comes first, all right? Now, you don't need the author's first name, just his last name, and the year of publication. You don't need the full publication date. So, for example, if there's a quotation from this article and you don't mention Sigmund Freud in the paper, then what you would put is parenthesis, Freud 2000, 2000. I cannot talk and type. 2000. Close parenthesis, all right? That's called an in-text citation. That provides the reader with just enough information to send him or her to your references page. And by the way, in APA formatting, we call that page references. In MLA formatting, you're probably familiar with the term works cited. Oh, I'm terrible. Works cited. So what that means are these are the works that I cited, that I mentioned in my paper. Again, that's MLA formatting. And APA, which is what we're using, you title the bibliography references. All right. These are the works that I refer to. It's got the same root as refer to in my paper. All right. And the third page of this handout that, again, I'll have the link for if you want to use it, gives you some examples of in-text citations. Also, you had a reading assignment in your textbook this week that covers APA formatting, and I also gave you some the links to Purdue OWL, which is an accredited site. The Purdue University has a writing center, and they came up with this particular site that keeps track of all of this information. And so colleges and universities throughout the country use Purdue OWL to help their students with documentation, among other things. Now, one other thing that I want to mention is if there is no author, you start with the title. All right? It was down? Okay, I'll double check the links, Alexander, and make sure that that the links are correct. Unless they're working on the site for some reason. If there is no author, then you go by the title of the article. All right. So, for example, this happens a lot, especially with web pages, that there won't be an author provided, and so unless it's a corporate author, because notice you've got like McDonald's would go here if it's McDonald's corporate site. But if there is no author provided, then what comes first is never the date. So what you do is you move the title of the page. It was maintenance. Okay. They should have that back up and running, but I'll verify those links and make sure that it's working. So what you do is you move this here, all right, if there's no author given. So the title of either the title of the web page or the title of the particular article. So it would be Flying the Kite is Easy. Then you would have the date, February 2002, February. No, you don't actually have to invert this if you don't want to. It's fine to put February 2002. Now, notice in the in-text citation, though, you don't put the month and you don't put the author's initial, just to repeat that again. All right, Flying the Kite is Easy, then the date, then everything else in the same order after the parenthesis, American Almanac, and so forth. All right. We will again review this when it comes time for you to actually need it a little bit more than you do right now, because the main thing that you need this for, you've got those 2 assignments that you're doing for me, and that's where we get a little bit more into, well, the one assignment, the paraphrase, summary, and direct quotation. Do you have any questions on this before we begin to talk about plagiarism and then the actual assignment? Any questions? All right, so let's go this. I provided this information with you, but I want to for you about how to identify plagiarism. So I just want to go over some things really quickly in case you have any questions about it. But first, here's the source. This is a paragraph I actually copied word for word from this source. So there's the author's last name, comma, first initial. It was written by John Krakauer. It was 1998. All right. Here's the title of the book. And then here's the publication information, the place it was published, the colon, the publisher, and then the page numbers. After this, I gave you 6 samples and asked if each sample was plagiarized or not. Now, I want you to know that you will have a similar exercise on your test, which opens next Friday, all right, where I'm going to give you, and you literally will say yes or no. You don't have to fix it, but I will say, is this plagiarized or not? I'll give you a paragraph. I will give you the in-text citation, and it will be very similar, quite frankly, to this exercise. So the first one's plagiarized for 2 reasons. It's copied word for word. There are no quotation marks around it, and there's no documentation. and by documentation I mean an in-text citation. Remember that the in-text citation is built off of the bibliographic entry, author's last name, year of publication. All right, so I give you the example of how to fix it. If you mention the author's name in the text itself, you don't have to repeat it in the parentheses. You just have to put the year. All right. And then here's the direct quote, placed in quotation marks. Now, the only time you need a page number is if it's a print source, if you're literally holding the newspaper, the magazine, the book in your hands. Otherwise, forget pages, forget paragraph numbers. You don't need any of that if it's an online source, okay? The second one is not plagiarized. Notice that the student writer here just copied these 6 words. They're in the same order. She placed them in quotation marks, right? Somebody might need to mute their microphone. I'm getting a little bit of, and the way you do that is that little microphone symbol, just click on it down below. And then if you want to talk, feel free to unmute yourself. But I'm just hearing a little bit of background noise. This one is not. Again, you've got the quotation marks around it. Remember, the guideline is 5 or more words written in the same order as the original source. If you copy those, you have to put them in quotation marks to show that's somebody else's sentence right there. And then, but we also have the in-text citation, right? So there's the author's name, there's the date, and then it included the page number, because this was the book that I actually copied this from. If students miss anything, they miss this one. When I hand this out during class as kind of an exercise, which I do, and I ask students, okay, to see what they know, how many of these are plagiarized, and then to fix it. Usually if anything's missed, it's usually this third one, okay? Because what's happened here, this is the idea of stealing somebody's sentence structures. You're stealing somebody's style. And quite frankly, I didn't know this was plagiarism until I started teaching. Teaching it a few years, it's more like 15 years ago, because back in the day, this is what we did. We copied, and then we would get a thesaurus, and we would change out the words. We'd find a different word for existence, and we'd find a different word for, grave concern, and a different one. And so that's actually still too close to the original source because you copied somebody's sentences. So that's the reason. Notice that presence replaces, existence, and grave concern replaces serious unease replaces grave concern, and then everyone else replaces other expeditions. So that's why this is plagiarized. It's not copied word for word, but it's the same sentence structures. Okay, hope that makes sense. All right, number 4 simply lacks quotation marks around the direct quotation. Right, it's got good documentation, but it just lacked those quotation marks. Number 5 is plagiarized because there's no documentation. So all you have to do is add that at the end. And because you don't mention the author's name in the text itself, you put it here, Krakauer, 1988, and so forth. All right. And then the last one is a good a student paraphrase, kind of condensing down a lot of that information. The student wrote it in her own words, but notice she's still giving credit to her source with this in-text citation. All right, any questions about this before we go straight to your exercise for today? For this week. Okay, this exercise, so many students do not do it correctly. I'm just going to be blunt about it. They either they don't watch the video or attend the live session, or they don't read carefully what they're supposed to do, or they do it at the last minute and do not give themselves time to do a good job with it. And so unfortunately, and you will have a similar exercise to this on the test next week. So unfortunately, it's very important to get it right the first time, okay? So this is the original source, all right? Now the difference between, I didn't show this PowerPoint, but it's in your folder that talks about paraphrasing and summarizing. The difference between You know what a direct quotation is. The difference between a paraphrase and a summary is one of length. Both are written in your own words, right? But a paraphrase works line by line, literally with the information. So for example, if you paraphrase a 5-sentence paragraph, your paraphrase will be 5 sentences. You take the ideas in the first line and you rewrite it in your own words, and you take the ideas in the second line and you rewrite it in your own words. You work very, very closely with what's there. Still writing it in your own words, still needing to document it, right? A summary, you reduce it down to just the main idea. It's almost like if you can find the topic sentence of that paragraph, that's you put that in your own words and document it, but that's the summary. The summary is just working with the gist of the thing. A paraphrase is pretty much as long as the original, all right, a true paraphrase. So in this case, we have this paragraph that I did lift from an essay by this guy, John Ciardi, entitled What is Happiness? And the publication date was 2010. All right. So here's the original. Happiness is never more than partial. There are no pure states of mankind. Whatever else happiness may be, it is neither in having nor in being, but in becoming. And I'm using this as a sample for you to kind of walk you through what to do. What the Founding Fathers declared for us as an inherent right, we should do well to remember, was not happiness, but the pursuit of happiness. What they might have underlined, could they have foreseen the happiness market, is the cardinal fact that happiness is in the pursuit itself, and the meaningful pursuit of what is life-engaging and life-revealing, which is to say, in the idea of becoming. Now, these are complex ideas, and the thing about paraphrase is it's not easy, and summary. It's not easy. That's the reason you can't really do this assignment at the last minute and do very well with it. A nation is not measured by what it possesses or wants to possess, but by what it wants to become. All right, so here's my paraphrase. According to John Ciardi, now I mentioned him in the text itself, so I don't have to repeat this at the end, all right? There was a page number, but I didn't include that on the other one. And then here's the date in parentheses following his name in his essay, What is Happiness? It is not possible to be completely happy. Humanity is not capable of attaining pure anything. Now that's what I said for happiness is never more than partial. Instead of completely happy, instead of this, I said completely happy. There are no pure states of mankind. Notice that it's okay to use some of the same words. You just don't use the same sentence structures. You've got to change it up some. All right, so I repeated that idea of pure. True happiness does not lie in owning something or in being something, but in the journey of becoming something. That's my paraphrase for whatever else happiness may be. It is neither in having nor in being, but in becoming. Again, you can see I used some of the same words, but I totally changed it up as far as the sentence structures. What the Founding Fathers declared for us as an inherent right we should do well to remember was not happiness, but the pursuit of happiness. So what I said there was when this country was established, the Founding Fathers, and I should have used a different word instead of repeating that, our right to pursue happiness, not have it. Okay? What they might have underlined, could they have foreseen the happiness market, is the original cardinal fact that happiness is in the pursuit itself, the meaningful pursuit, life-engaging, life-revealing, the idea of becoming. So I paraphrase that to say, if they could have seen the consumer-driven definition that we currently ascribe to happiness. So notice I really did change that up. I use a lot of different words there, but it means the same thing. Notice I'm not giving my opinion. I'm not making comment about it. I'm just working with Ciardi's ideas. That would remind us that true happiness comes from striving to attain goals that are, now I couldn't think of a better way to say this, so I copied it word for word the same way he had it, and I just put it in quotation marks. All right. A nation is not measured by what it possesses or wants to possess, but by what it wants to become. And so for that I put, a country should be judged by what it strives to be rather than what it strives to own. Okay? So there's my paraphrase. And again, not easy, took some time to do it, but notice that I stayed true to his original ideas. Yes, when you paraphrase, that's a good question, Letitia. When you paraphrase, you say you must restructure each sentence along with finding similar words as the original. Exactly. You do, if the sentence itself is the same structure and you just change a word or two, what you've done is that, remember that third example in the plagiarism exercise. It's not enough just to copy something and change a word or two. By the way, in Microsoft Word, if you right-click on a word, it usually can give you a thesaurus with some synonyms. But you've got to change it up more than that. You've got to move away from the original a bit more than that. Yeah, very good question. Does that answer it for you? Okay, yeah, that one most everybody gets wrong, and again, quite frankly, I had no clue it was plagiarism. I thought you could just change a couple of words out of sentences, and it took. I mean, honestly, plagiarism's a lot more complicated than just some of the, the way most of us were taught it in high school and even college. For example, if you write a paper and you primarily just use one source for that paper, that's also considered you're plagiarizing that person's. You're just repeating what they said. If you only have like one source that you heavily rely on, so there are all types of kind of little ins and outs here, and it does get tricky. Again, 85% of the time, students don't intend to plagiarize. It's not intentional. It's just knowing how to handle information. All right, so let's go to then the summary. Let me see if I can find it. All right, let's look at the summary. All right, again, summary condenses down into, so if you've got like a 5 or 6 sentence paragraph, then your summary will only be 1 or 2 sentences. It's just the gist. It's just the main idea. Again, you have to document it, right? All right, so John Ciardi, there's my documentation, in his essay, What is Happiness?, stresses that what truly makes us happy and should define us as a country is not materialism, but our willingness to take on worthy pursuits. Now, I found I couldn't summarize this in 1 sentence, so and get all the key ideas in it. So essentially, I've got 2 sentences here. We will be our happiest as we attempt to achieve life-affirming goals, all right? So that's the key idea. Now, I didn't do a direct quotation as part of this exercise, so this is simple enough, because I'm asking you to do 3 things in that exercise: to paraphrase that paragraph and include an in-text citation for practice, to summarize and include an in-text citation for practice, and then to directly quote. And so finally, to directly quote, I could just simply say, and this is, by the way, called a signal phrase. Anytime that you set up a direct quote, you should always set up direct quotations with signal phrases. You can, if you want to, also set up John Ciardi. You can also use them in paraphrases and summaries. So John Ciardi, this is my signal phrase, says, comma, quotation mark, happiness is never more than partial, period, close, quotation mark. I don't know why I didn't do that, close quote. Right, so, and that would be completing the entire assignment. All right, does anybody have any questions about this or anything else I've covered? We will definitely go more in depth, when I actually assign your research right at the end of the semester. You'll have a couple of weeks to work on it. Just like with the comparison and contrast paper, I'll look at your draft, give you feedback, make sure you're not unintentionally plagiarizing, make sure your documentation's correct, and then you'll do the final, and that'll be the last week of class to do your final research right. The test will open. Okay, and Alexander, if you rewatch this and you have some additional questions, please don't hesitate to email me. I'll be glad to answer them. The test will be week 10, so week 10's folder will open next Monday. And the test itself, to give me time to grade everything before then, the test itself will open at 8 o'clock Monday morning, and it will be over, and then, a Friday morning next week, a week from tomorrow, and then it will remain open until Monday night. It's just, and it'll be the same kind of format as last time. It will only cover the information in week 6 through 9. And then also, I don't know if you were on, Letitia, when I mentioned that our grace period, our grace week starts next Monday as well, and I sent out an email about that. Okay, if there's any other question I can answer for you now, I'll be glad to do so. If not, I will send out the link for this recording so that you can access it. It'll probably be within the hour because I have to upload it to YouTube and include closed captioning and that kind of thing. So, but I'll send it out within the hour.
Hey,
Any other
Professor.
questions for me? Yes.
I definitely want a copy of those documents you were talking about earlier with the
Okay.
the references.
Uh-huh.
Because you said that's going to be on the test, right?
That I think you only have one little format because you haven't really worked with it yet.
Okay.
You'll actually work more with having to use those documentation formats. In weeks 11 through 14. So you'll really be tested on it at the end of the semester, but you will have one sample, like I'll give you the information so you can put it in order. And so that little, I recommend students have that little guideline handy or something open that they, one of the resources I've given you about APA documentation to help you. But yes, I'll have that link and that will be part of what I email out to you. Okay, I'll email as an attachment or something. Okay.
Okay, that sounds great.
Great. Okay. Final thing, by the way, at the end of the semester, there's no comprehensive exam covering everything. Our unit test, to me, you've been tested enough. So the unit test on each 5 weeks, we're almost 2/3 of the way through the class. Congratulations. And so the unit tests cover enough that I don't feel like we need to then go back and have a large test. So, all right. If you come up with any other questions for me, please let me know. And otherwise, we are done. Hope you have a good afternoon.